Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we're back with another class remaster. Today we're talking about the Bard, and I decided to wear a green shirt today. So if there's some glitchiness in here, I apologize. But it's a Critical Role shirt, and the shirt's actually really comfy. It's one of the comfiest shirts I own. So rather than changing, which I was tempted to do, I'm just going to wear the shirt. So you're just all going to have to deal with it. So let's go and start talking about Bard. So Bard got not that many changes, and this is kind of where many of these videos I feel are going to start getting shorter and shorter, as many of the classes didn't get as big of changes as my prior 3 videos. That doesn't mean that nothing changed. Many of the classes got some new feats and even some changes on some very popular feats. So I figure it's worth getting into each one of these classes. And Bard is no exception. As well, Bard stays mostly the same. It, similar to Rogue and some other classes as well, got martial weapons proficiency, which is really good because it's the only full caster that starts out just with full weapon martial proficiency. It's really good. And you might be asking, well, then what does that mean for martial performance? Because that's what martial performance did if you weren't Warrior Muse. Well, martial performance changed for Warrior Muse. Martial performance now better synergizes between the use of composition cantrips and attacking, which is something that I always kind of struggled to really match, because sometimes you just had to make choices. You had to make choices between whether you wanted to attack or whether you wanted to use one of your composition cantrips or spells. And most of the time you just use your compositions because obviously you weren't as good of a martial character. Now you really don't have to choose. So what martial performance does now is when you have Courageous Anthem, which is the name for Inspire Courage, which Inspire Courage is a D&D thing, so this just had to change, obviously. So whenever you have the Courageous Anthem composition active, whenever you damage an enemy with a strike, the spell's duration is extended by 1 round. You can extend an individual casting only once in this way. So that's strange because you can only extend an individual casting only once in this way. So does that mean that you can only extend it 1 round and then need to cast it again the round after that? I'm actually not sure. It's very strange because it says you can extend an individual casting only once in this way. It's not per round, it's not per turn, it says only once. So my assumption is they didn't want to make it you just keep up the aura pretty much and you strike enemies and now you're just a martial character who has a really good buff. Now I'm pretty sure they want you to cast it but every other round. Now, it says if you gain Rallying Anthem or Song of Strength composition cantrips, you can apply this benefit to those cantrips as well. So, pretty much, this is a really good buff in general for Warrior Muse and motivates them to attack with a martial weapon, which honestly was the biggest point of being a Warrior Muse anyway. So, martial performance getting a huge buff, and Bard in general getting a huge buff, just getting martial weapon proficiency, is really good. So if you want to play a Gish style character and you're interested in, you mixing martial and magic more, Warrior Muse I might really recommend. Now, Magus is obviously the go-to, but this one is much more based on supportiness. So if you want more of a support character in that style, this is the way to go. And honestly, Bard is insanely strong just due to how much it can just pull from martial abilities and utilize those, because this is just whenever you damage an enemy with a strike. That means if you pick up any feats from Fighter, for instance, or any other martial kind of archetype, whenever you use a ability that constitutes using a strike, that counts for martial performance. It's really good, actually, because the difference is it's not saying when you use a strike action, which is different. It is when you damage an enemy with a strike, which most strike actions or most strike feats say make a strike, then this happens. So it's really good for blending with other archetypes as well. And I don't know, Bard's just really good, especially after I kind of combed through everything Bard essentially. This works really, really well. And before we get too much more into it, I do need to say thank you to Paizo for providing to me the books for the player core and the GM core so I could review all this material and get it out to you guys where I can succinctly get all the information together, give you hopefully the most compact video of all the changes for the classes, plus some minor explanations. But I will say this video is not sponsored by Paizo. They only provided the materials to me as a compliment for reviewing their material. All thoughts and opinions here are my own. And on top of that, I've been pumping out tons of content. I'm planning on doing so much more for this stuff. So if you want to get as much information before the official book release in stores on the 15th, please subscribe to the channel or at least like it so that someone else can get this information that they're looking for. It would really help the channel out, and we've been growing real quickly because of it. So I would appreciate it if anything, but it's also mostly for your all benefits. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. Something I did find very interesting is, so I mentioned earlier that Inspire Courage is now Courageous Anthem. That's a name change because Inspire Courage was a big D&D thing, but Bard still has counter performance, and I'm pretty sure counter performance is a thing in D&D 5e, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure counter performance is currently a thing Bards can do. It sucks in D&D 5e, but it's there. So that was just an interesting not change of a name when there have been so many name changes overall. It's just, I don't know. It's something very interesting. Regardless, whenever you're looking for Inspire Courage, you're looking for Courageous Anthem now. So just so you're aware. All right, so now we're already on the feats. Not much really changed with Bard in general, but some other feats did change. And something I found interesting, Bard actually got a couple new feats, and they didn't really lose any feats. Some of their feats did change names, of course, but they just didn't really lose any feats. So it makes me think that Bard was just a little lackluster. And when I was going over core, Bard did not have many feats at all, which was a bit tragic. So I feel like many of the casters just got bonus feats to bring them up to the same levels as, say, like the fighter or ranger or rogue, who did have, I believe, a lot more starting feats in the game. One of those feats actually is Emotional Push. This is a new reaction. You can pick this up at level 2, and the trigger is when an enemy you're aware of fails its save against an emotional spell. You use your reaction, the target then becomes off guard against your next attack before the end of your next turn. So really good for Warrior Muse if you're going that way. This just makes it so that if an enemy fails its save, you can put on the pressure and strike them. This is not super good if you're not a Warrior Muse Bard, though I will say if you do have any attack spells that use the attack, use an attack roll, spell attack, there we go, that's what I was looking for. This is actually pretty solid. I don't know if many spells in the occult list have an attack roll, but if there are, well, then this is going to be a really good one to pick up in general, especially since Bard just doesn't have many reactions. So Emotional Push is actually really good. And since a lot of your spells from the occult spell list do have the emotion trait, you can get this off a lot more frequently than you think. And making an enemy off guard against your next attack to them, doesn't say what kind, not martial, not melee or range or anything, can be a spell attack. This opens up a lot of opportunities for a wide variety of bards. The feat Melodious Spell, which is a meta magic, now a spell shape, level 4 that you can pick up, got some changes. Now, no longer do you need to attempt to make a performance check to essentially disguise your spell casting. This is essentially Conceal Spell from Wizard, only the Bard version, but better. Because it's at level 4, they gave it a little something extra to kind of match. And one of the biggest parts with Melodious Spell that changed here is that in addition to the effects of essentially a Conceal Spell, you can create a diversion, demoralize, perform, or make a request of an enemy. If you do so, the spell you cast must have the auditory, emotion, sonic, or visual trait to gain the subtle trait. So this is very interesting. I really do like Melodious Spell. It really blends in the bardic charisma. You're already talking, doing something while you're charming your foes. And I think this is really good. This is a very solid way to implement it in a lot of situations. And creative diversion is really good, as it allows you to essentially, even if the spell is not really meant to be subtle in the sense, you can still apply it because creative diversion just makes the enemy off guard, even if you're not making a melee strike against them. That being the case, this blends really well with attack spells, as we mentioned with the emotional push. So another really good spell, like adjustment, that just made Melodious Spell less tedious to use, because now you don't need to make a check to essentially get the same benefits as Conceal Spell. And because it's a higher level, they give it a little bit of extra. So honestly, a much better version of Conceal Spell, in my opinion. Oh, going back to level 2, Inspire Competence got changed to Uplifting Overture. This is very interesting, and there was a change here. Oh, right. Okay, I think I know. What was that one? Sorry. Okay, yeah, it is. Okay. So I don't know why this one got changed, the name change for it anyway. Maybe it was something in D&D, I'm not sure. And, you know, I'm going to say this now. I've been seeing it in the comments all the time. Yes, I'm aware that most of the time when Pathfinder changed names, they were doing it to separate from D&D. That's not always the case. I'm actually somewhat very familiar with D&D and what's in D&D. So unless it's like from an older edition, which I mean is always possible for sure, whenever I bring it up, I'll mention whether I know because it's from D&D or it's weird because I don't think it's from D&D. Just so we're clear, I'm gonna get the comment no matter what. But I want to state out loud that I'm aware. Okay, I'm aware. I know why they made these changes. Thank you. Anyway, so yeah, recap. Inspire Competence got changed to Uplifting Overture. Oh, I didn't move my camera again. All right, camera moved because I forgot in the last video, and I forgot for the first, 15 minutes of this video? So, whatever. Anyway, so there's another new feat for Maestro Muse. It's In Tune. It's a level 4 feat. It's a spell shape that you can apply. And essentially what it is that if your next action is to cast a composition spell with an emanation area, its area spreads from a willing ally of your choice within 60 feet instead of you. If you have Directed Audience, another feat that Bard already had, you can have that cone originate from that ally instead. So In Tune is pretty good, and the emanation is huge. This is amazing for Dirge of Doom. Dirge of Doom is one of Bard's like best abilities, and now with In Tune, you can place Dirge of Doom on one of your frontliners instead, which will make it much better, and you don't necessarily have to be in combat if you don't want to, making it a very solid pickup if you're a big fan of Dirge of Doom, which I know I am. So this is a really solid pickup. Now, the interesting thing about In Tune is it was needed because Maestro lost a feat, actually, but the feat didn't go away. So what instead happened was Inspire Defense got changed to Rallying Anthem. Rallying Anthem is no longer a Maestro Muse, Inspire Defense essentially is now no longer a Maestro Muse feat, which makes a ton of sense because the Maestro or the Warrior Muse Bard needed Inspire Defense for one of their other feats. So that being the case, what was it? It was, that's what it was. Defensive Coordination, which was a Warrior Muse Bard feat that required Inspire Defense, which you could only pick up as a Maestro Muse. Now, with it being changed to Rallying Anthem, it's much easier for, literally any kind of Bard to pick up Rallying Anthem, which I think is good. Giving all Bards access to an ability that boosts AC and spell saves is very solid. But now Warrior Muse does not need to suffer need to pick up what it was like Versatile Performance or something. There was whatever, multifarious muse, there you go. They don't need to pick that one up anymore, just to select one of their own specific feats. Inversely as well, Maestro doesn't need to pick up Warrior Muse to pick it up either. So, well, actually they do for defensive coordination, but it was something that was just very strange. I'm so glad they fixed this. It was so irksome sometimes trying to get the best like attack style of Bard and struggling because the feats were just really weird. So that's a really good change. All right, another name change here is Inspire Heroics changed to Fortissimo Composition. I think Inspire Heroics or something Heroics might have been a D&D thing at some point, so I'm not 100% sure on that one. Maybe it was just something that they did with the original. So this is another thing that might have been the case. The original Pathfinder First Edition was made under the old OGL license, and obviously they're not going to rework First Edition Pathfinder to work with the new orc stuff. It's a game they pretty much have moved beyond. So it might be a case of any feats and things from First Edition Pathfinder might also have some of that same irksomeness with the OGL nonsense. So that might be why the changes. I don't know why they changed this one. Not a lot of people know what Fortissimo means, but regardless, now instead of Inspire Heroics, we have Fortissimo Composition. Another strange name change, but I guess it just keeps in concert with the name change for Reactive Strike. We now have Reflexive Courage, which was Courageous Opportunity. So Courage is still in there, so it's just the difference between Opportunity, which is no longer Attack of Opportunity. Instead, it's called Reflexive Strike. So Reflexive Courage, I guess, is just a better naming convention, which I generally agree with. It makes sense, though you could have kept it and people still would have understood. I don't know. I mean, it's just a name change. It took them like 2 seconds to do. So yeah, but that is another name change if you're keeping track. Like many of the casters here in the new remaster, the level 12 feats that they got to get 2 focus points, this one is Inspirational Focus, now restores all your focus points rather than just 2, which does mean that they did lose a feat later on. What was that feat called? Oh, actually, Bard, I don't think ever had a level 18 feats to get all their focus points back, which is really strange now that I'm looking at it. Yeah, wow. That kind of sucks for Bard because Bard uses, I mean, mostly focus cantrips, don't get me wrong, but Bard not having at least one for some of their other focus spells, that just kind of feels bad. They got the 2 version, but not the 3 version. So that's interesting. So yeah, that's just an even bigger boost because now Bard is capable of getting all their focus points back rather than, only getting 2 back max at most. So a pretty big buff, actually, technically. So Inspirational Focus is not only just a better feat in general, but now it's just a buff to Bard overall because before they couldn't get all their focus points back. That's very sad for Bard, actually. Bard is one of those classes that I feel like got forgotten when Paizo was doing a lot of like erratas and reworking things. Mostly because Bard always just felt good anyway, so it didn't really have many flaws I felt that people wanted. Now looking at it and like analyzing it, it's actually bizarre how Bard did not get some of the other quality of life features that some of the other casters had. So yeah, that's a really good change, actually. Also at level 12, Reverberate actually got changed. It now no longer has a crit failure effect, which made you take double the sonic damage when you crit failed. Very good, and honestly, because of how much damage some sonic attacks can do in the game, crit failing one of those could have killed your character. So it's especially with the new dying rules, which I may go into sometime next week. We'll see. This is a pretty solid change overall, and honestly, you don't want to put into your feats a feels bad moment just for rolling poorly. Feats are supposed to be only improvements for your character after all, unless there's some kind of trade-off for it. And there wasn't really one for Reverberate. It was good situationally as a reaction when sonic damage came up, which wasn't very common. And you had a potential of doubling the damage instead a 5% chance always, which is tragic. So this one is a lot better in my opinion, and I think works out better for Bard in general. All right, at level 14, we have yet another name change. We have Vigorous Anthem instead of Vigorous Inspiration. So yeah, it just because it's no longer Inspire Courage, it's Courageous Anthem. It's now Vigorous Anthem rather than Vigorous Inspiration. That's it. That's the only reason for the name change. So yeah, that's a thing. All right, that's it for the feats, but Bard still has a change to one of their focus cantrips. Song of Marching. And before I kind of get into this as well, I'm aware that Witch got the immunities removed from most of their hex cantrips predominantly. I'm aware, and I'm going to do a video on that, a very short video on hex cantrips because so many people were very upset that I didn't mention it. It really didn't change how most witches operated other than if you ever needed to stop concentrating on one of your cantrips, you couldn't like reapply it to an enemy. Most of witches focus hexes or hex cantrips were concentration up to a minute. Most combats didn't last more than a minute, so most of them didn't really change in function, but now you can change them. So I'm going to do a whole video on that. It'll probably be like a 8-minute video or something, and you'll get your video. So if you're upset about that, I've heard you, and I've been annoyed enough to make a video about it, so you're welcome. But let's talk about Song of Marching. So Song of Marching, now actually people want to take, because it's a really good exploration activity, essentially. So Song of Marching was mostly the same, except for the addition of, if you enter an encounter while performing the song, you can use your performance modifier for initiative for the roll, and you and your effective allies also receive a +1 status bonus to that initiative. So this allows Bard to, yet again, make performance one of their other skill checks, and give them and their allies that +1. Sorry, scouts, I know you're trying desperately to get that bonus to your allies, but the fighters and now the bards are stepping on your toes. It's so unfortunate, but yeah. So Song of Marching actually, I think, is good. Is it worth a feat pickup, in my opinion? Maybe. It depends on how bad you want to use performance for initiative. If you're really investing in performance, and there's really no reason not to with Bard, especially if you're a Maestro Muse, I think it's a solid pickup just because it makes your initiative way, way better, which gets you your cantrips off easier so that you can buff your allies or debuff the enemies. It's not bad for the Bard to go first in combat, honestly. So I think that's a good thing. And plus giving you and your allies all that +1 status bonus for the allies that can take it anyway. I think this this is essentially just a better scouting, more or less. So I do think this is good. Terrible for stealth, but I think it's good, but it only depends on how badly you want to go first in combat. So depending on how bad you want to go first, that's how good this particular feat / cantrip is. And yeah, that's it for Bard. This is a much shorter video than the other ones. I know it still took a little bit of time, but it's just, I want to make sure that I do everything. I looked over every feat, every spell, all that kind of stuff to make sure that you guys know 100% of what's coming out when the book fully releases. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me. And tomorrow, we're going to take a look at the changes to Fighter, which some of them might surprise you. So stay tuned. Bye.